At dusk, a merchant galley slides into the harbor of Marseille without a shout, without a rope thrown, without a single living greeting. The sails hang like torn shrouds. Only the creak of wet timber and a bell that tolls itself. Dockhands freeze at the edge of the quay, counting lanterns that do not move. They say a physician boarded, first invited by no one, stopped by no one. He carried a black book and a case that chimed softly when he walked. "Keep your distance," he told the watch, or the city would drown in fever. Then the hatch closed behind him and the smoke began, pale at first, then thick as prayer. Through the haze, figures appear at the rail and vanish again, as if the ship were swallowing its own crew. Each night the bell rings, and each morning the head count falls. On the third evening, the wind shifts, and the harbor learns the truth. The galley is not empty. It is listening. Welcome to the Macabre Physician, where history bleeds into horror. Subscribe. Marseille, autumn of 1347. Word rides the Mistral faster than any horse. Ships from the east limp into western ports with fever sealed in their hulls. Stevedores speak of Kaffa and Messina in the same breath as confession. Of sailors who cough red into their sleeves and swear they are only seasick. The port magistrates pray over wax tablets and argue about grain, tariffs, contagion. Yet coin always moves easier than caution. And fear is a poor clerk. He arrives with the tide, a physician of uncertain patronage, wrapped in oilcloth and a hood that eats the lantern light. He knows the new language of this illness, buboes, carbuncles, breath that turns sweet and then stops hand. He recites it like a catechism to the watch. He offers a remedy older than law, isolation at sea. Keep the sick aboard, he insists. Let the smoke work where prayers fail. The harbor nods, grateful to outsource terror. On the quay, fishermen cross themselves when the bell drifts over the water at Awarsa. Mothers keep children indoors and pin sprigs of rue above their doors. In taverns, the story turns simple. A good man has taken a bad risk for the city. But in the alleys behind St. Laurent, where the wind forgets to blow, quieter rumor spreads that the doctor asks no payment, takes meticulous notes, and leaves no witnesses to argue with his results. The physician crossed the plank alone, the harbor lamps shrinking behind him until Marseille felt like a rumor. The galley met him with a damp breath pitch, salt, and something sweet curling out of the hatch like incense gone wrong. Lanterns swung without hands. Ropes sagged where they should have sung. He paused, listening, and the whole answered with a slow, inland heartbeat, water knocking at ribs, a patient counting time. On deck, he found the remnants of order chalk marks near the mast, a prayer scraped into the rail, a cup overturned with a print of lips and salt. Someone had tried to live here to keep the world measured. The physician stooped and set his leather case down. Inside, glass vials, the color of old honey, folded gauze, an iron hook, a quill with a slit like a smile. The case rang softly when he closed it, as if the instruments were agreeing. He called out in the language of care, "Bring me the fevered." No answer, only rigging whispering to itself. A shape moved in the companionway asleep. A shoulder hand retreated when the lantern's circle touched it. He did not pursue. He had learned that the sick come closer to their own reflections. A calm voice, an organized table, a label tied to a wrist. He lit 2 candles and set them like eyes above the hatch top below. The smoke thickened. He dipped the cloth in vinegar and tied it at his throat, more habit than faith, then descended. The steps groaned, counting each foot. The between-decks opened like a throat, narrow and crowded with pallets. Bottles clinked when the ship rolled. Somewhere, a cough rehearsed itself and failed. "Rest," he said, not to anyone in particular. "The city is safe. So are you." Sailor watched him from a hammock, cheeks hollowed into hills. The physician raised his lantern and the man flinched. Not from light, but from the ledger that followed the black book. its pages ruled with patient lines. Names already marched there, neat as stitches. He asked the sailor for his, and when the answer came, he wrote it with a careful hand, then measured heat at the brow like a priest measuring grace. He chose 3 quiet ones, the kind that obeyed the gravity of a voice and guided them toward a door reinforced with iron straps. Isolation, he explained, as the ship knocked softly beneath them, for the good of all. Behind the door, the air felt older, close to the earth. He set his case on a crate, opened the book to a clean page, and listened until the harbor bell drifted thin through the planks. The city would sleep easier tonight, he thought, hearing only the bell. The galley, however, had learned a new sound, the crisp turn of a page, and the steady, unwavering scratch of a quill. At sunrise, the harbor watch held him from the quay, voices thinned by distance and dread. He answered with the authority of measured breath. The sick would remain aboard. The smoke would cleanse where salt could not. He spoke of quarantines practiced in distant ports, of weeks counted like rosary beads until fever burned itself to ash. The magistrates, grateful for any doctrine that sounded like order, affixed their seals to his arrangement. The city would pay in patience. He would pay in vigilance. No one asked the price of his certainty. He made a ward out of timber and will. Pallets were spaced with the care of a chessboard, lanterns placed so shadows fell where he wished them to fall. He boiled vinegar and herbs until the air stung the eyes and suggested purity. He wrapped wrists with tagged twine, recited names into his ledger, and dated each page as if time obeyed ink. When sailors begged for confession, he offered a draught the color of amber and told them to rest. When they asked for water, he measured it. When they asked for light, he lowered the wick. He inspected buboes like a cartographer mapping foreign coasts, not lingering on pain nor turning away from it. He noted which groans sharpened before dawn, which coughs carried a metal echo, which pulses faltered when the sea went still. Between observations, he wound the censer and let medicinal smoke bloom, a curtain of safety that also served as veil. The harbor praised him for prudence. The watch sent bread and news by skiff and would not cross the rail. Each delivery returned lighter. Each night the bell tolled, and each morning his black book grew, heavier by the weight of names rewritten as numerals. To the frightened, he remained a physician. To the careful, a scholar. Only the ship learned the third word for him, the one whispered in the ribs when the candles sank low. Collector. By the second week, the between decks no longer resembled a hold, but a design. Tables were leveled with wedges of driftwood. Buckets of brine steamed like small geysers. A curtain of sailcloth divided silence from pleading. The physician moved through it as a tide moves predictable, stoppable, touching each station with the same careful ritual. Lantern, ledger, pulse. He made instruments from the ship itself. A rib of broken barrel became a splint. A nail, straightened and laved in vinegar, served finer purposes. He weighed breaths against the roll of the hull, counting how the sea coaxed or resisted the chest. When fever spoke, he answered in measures. A draught, a poultice, a puff of smoke whose taste stung the tongue and then dulled it. Rest, he murmured, an oath without warmth. Names kept changing into numbers. He rewrote them with the clerics. Discipline, tracing columns that revealed patterns, which vapors steadied a rattle, which herbs quieted the throat, which combinations muffled fear fastest. He did not call it fear. In the margins, he wrote efficacy. Sometimes the sea calmed so completely that the ship became a church. In that stillness, he heard the tiny arguments of the hull, the creak of seams, the tick of lantern wicks, the soft click when a vial met a stopper. He listened as if the galley were tutoring him. Above, gulls circled but would not land. When voices thinned on one side of the curtain, he closed his book and stepped there with the gravity of a judge. The censer swung, breathing resin and rue. Shadows thickened where he had taught them to thicken. He spoke to the remaining patients, about the science of surviving. He praised their courage. Then he asked for quiet, so he could hear what the illness said next. Occasionally, the hatch opened to admit a new soul transferred from a skiff, tagged by the watch, offered up with the relief of men outsourcing dread. He received each offering without surprise, as if the harbor itself were part of the apparatus. Marseille waited for a cure. He was building one out of wood, salt, smoke, and the exact length of other people's breaths. The bell began to toll at hours that did not belong to prayer or watch one stroke near midnight. 3 at dawn, a slow duet with the tide. Dawkins swore the rope moved with no hand upon it. The harbor learned to count along the way the sick count steps between breaths. Each pill drifted over slate water and settled in doorways like soot. On the third week, squall scattered papers from the galley's stern. A girl from the fish market, quick as a turn, snatched one from the chop and pressed it to a piling. Not a letter home, not a log of cargo. Lines marched in 2 disciplined columns, names paired to initials. Opposite them, neat numerals, and between them, small, cold words, draft, steam, intervals, end of margin. A diagram, not a cross nor a star, but an arrangement of circles with notes on how long each should burn. She brought the sheet to the watch. The youngest guard did not read it. He waited and found it heavier than paper. The magistrates asked for calm, as men do when they are not calm. They called it procedure, a physician's order, a necessary arithmetic to keep Marseille from Messina's fate. The paper dried on a brazier and curled like a leaf. That night, the bell spoke again, low and solitary. On deck, the physician paused to listen, gloved fingers resting on the rail where someone had carved a prayer and scratched it out. He closed his eyes, measuring the interval between peal and echo. Below him, the hold answered with a murmur chorus of beds shifting. A cough that decided not to arrive. He returned to his book. The ledger was clean despite the weather, its leather drinking lamplight. He added a line, then another, converting the day into figures that behaved better than people. Outside, the harbor exhaled, thinking the worst had crested. Inside, the censor breathed and the smoke obeyed, drawing a curtain between the promise he made to the city and the practice he kept with the sea. On a morning bruised purple by storm, the watch finally crossed the rail. They came with icons on cords and vinegar-soaked cloths tied at their mouths, stepping as if the planks might argue back. From shore, the harbor looked relieved, like a widow convinced the priest will say the right words. The physician stood near the mainmast lantern unlit, hands composed. "Too late," he said, not unkindly. "The fever keeps its own calendar." They divided, as men do when fear wishes to be busy. 2 went below and found the ward changed into something tidier than grief beads stripped. Bowls washed, a curtain pinned back as though the room had taken a deep breath. Smoke thickened in waves, carrying the clean, strange perfume of resins. "Open the hatches," someone barked, and the wind obliged, inhaling the fog and finding beneath it the discipline of a plan. Resin barrels had been rolled to the ribs. Pitch streaked the seams like handwriting. A line of kindling traced the path from locker to ladder like a catechism written in splinters. The youngest guard stared at it and whispered, "He taught the ship to burn." Above, the physician reached for a rope without hurry. A small boat hung from the davits, half shadow, half invitation. He set down his black book on the rail, as if leaving payment. "Keep Marseille clean," he said, which sounded like benediction until the match struck. Flame moved the way ink does when it finally understands the page. It wrote itself into the tar, into the seams, into the breaths that remained unsaid. Bells answered from shore, then choked on their echoes as smoke took the harbor's throat. Men ran in straight lines that could not hold. The physician lowered himself into the waiting boat with the steadiness of a man measuring a dose. The girl from the market found the book. It was warm as bread, unburned, its pages spared by a trick of wind. She opened to the last entry and saw columns that ended not in a sum, but an arrow. Below it, a list of ports. Some she knew by rumor. Some were merely directions. North 2 days, where the river meets salt, where bells outnumber windows. The galley became a brief sun. Sparks lifted and died over the breakwater like errant stars. In the orange of it, they watched the little boat slide toward the open water, a single lantern swaying like a pulse. Who was he? The youngest guard asked, not expecting an answer. The girl closed the book, hugging it like a child. Someone who hates loose ends, she said. Marseille would remember the bell and the smoke. He would remember the interval between them. And the sea, very patient, would offer him another harbor to test the distance anew. If this tale unsettled you, like the video and subscribe to the Macabre physician for the next case.